So I'm very sorry that you don't have the break now, but have to take the break a little bit later. But I have to catch my last train and we start a little bit later, so I'm sorry about that. So I'm a professor for human-computer interaction, and one of our expertise is in augmented reality and virtual reality, and we work since 15 years in basic research in this area. But today I want to talk about something which is considered as the holy grail of VR, which is allowing a user to explore the virtual environment in the most natural way. And this seems to be very easy, but it's still quite hard to technically implement that. So usually, if you have seen one of my presentations within the last couple of months, I always start with the same picture and ask people, who of you know this person? So one arm is up, two arms. So this is actually Ivan Sutherland. Ivan Sutherland is one of the creators of computer graphics. And in 1965, Ivan Sutherland wrote a wonderful essay called The Ultimate Display. And there he thought about or speculated what an ideal, optimal computer display would look like. And he concluded with the ultimate display would of course be a room within which the computer can control the existence of matter. What does that mean? So he gave some examples. So he said a chair displayed in such a room would be good enough to sit in. Handcuffs would be confining, and a bullet would be fatal. So the question is, why do we want to be in such an ultimate display in which handcuffs, bullets, and guns are items of the daily agenda? But he also wrote that with appropriate programming, such a display could literally be the wonderland into which let us walk. So the ultimate display would be a computer-mediated reality which gets indistinguishable from the real world, so what we know as virtual reality today. And actually just 3 years after he wrote his essay, that was in 1968, he was already able to build the first prototype of such an ultimate display. And what you see here is the original footage of the first augmented reality display ever. So this is a prototype that he built there, and it looks quite bulky, and it was called the sword of Damocles due to this mechanical construction. But what you see here is essentially all the components that we see today in current AR displays. So stereoscopic display, positional tracking, head tracking, of course with low latency, high latency at that time, low resolution, but still all essential components have been there. From there, it took 25 more years until the first VR hype, and this was actually when I got in contact with VR. So this was here in Berlin, in the Cyberspace Cafe, not far from here. And I got in contact with VR there for the first time, and I was able to play a game of Deck Time Nightmare. So who has played this game? So what you can see here is, again, original video footage from the time, about 30,000 polygons, all flat shaded, unacceptable latency, low resolution, very small field of view, but all essential components that we have in VR systems today. So stereoscopic display, head-mounted display, positional tracking, orientation tracking, 3D acoustics, as well as multi-user, and you could shoot other people. So from there it took again about 20 years until today, and these are the ultimate displays that we have today. They're still not optimal, not ultimate, but you get a glimpse how they will look like. And Kathleen said something about 3 years, 5 years, then we will have the next generation of this display and really get to a point where we can really talk about an ultimate display. And it gets pretty clear that the way how we interact with computers has also to be changed. We observed such transitions already in the past. So we moved our generation from command line interfaces, where you put your commands in a strict way into the system, to graphical user interfaces, where you use your mouse and keyboard and explore your desktop. And since the millennium, we talk about the next generation or paradigm of human-computer interaction, which will be natural user interfaces, which will be direct and intuitive. And science fiction tells us how this might look like. And Hollywood uses a lot of visually impressive visions how we might interact in the future with 3D content by just grabbing in the air and so on. Here's just a short video clip, and I think most of you have known it from Minority Report. So when that movie came out around the millennium, it really inspired research. We really thought, okay, this is super cool, we want to have that in our labs, and we need to implement that. And what you see here is Tom Cruise is able to interact with 2D and 3D content displayed in space, and he uses gestures in mid-air to interact here with video and image footage. Here is a commercial system exactly from the same time called the G-Speak system. This is developed or commercialized by Oblong Industries, and John Undercuffler is the CEO of this company. Do you know John Undercuffler? He was the technical supervisor of Steven Spielberg for Minority Report. And what you see is the commercial system that you could buy exactly at the same time when the movie came out. Did anybody of you bought this system? Did anybody of you know somebody who bought this system? Me neither. So I've never seen this system really in life except of this video. And there are a couple of reasons for that. So for instance, this interaction in a 3D space in which you can zoom into your pictures, into 2D content, that makes no sense at all. We have done a lot of studies, and a lot of other researchers did, in which we compared performance in mid-air, in which you touch something here, just with a mouse, for example, where you have more haptic feedback. And in most situations, you see that the typical 2D mouse performance is just better compared to such 3D interactions. Another problem, if you ever try and use the HoloLens for 6 hours a day in the office, you will observe that your arms feel heavy and oversized, which is known as the gorilla arm syndrome, already known from exhaustive mobile usage. And the other one, you can try the HoloLens demo, right? And there are a couple of these gestures which are natural, like this one, bloom gesture, or this finger tapping gesture. This is Microsoft's idea of a natural interface. I understand that it's easy to track from an optical point, but this is not the way how a natural user interface looks like, except if you're a chain smoker, then this might be a natural interface. So the question remains, what is natural then? In our understanding, natural should be something that you learn even if nobody taught you to do. So, and what is that? It would be like, I'm a young father, so my son is like 60 months now old, and I can observe firsthand that he starts to grab something, he starts to point somewhere, he starts to walk, even if nobody teaches him to do so. And actually researchers at the Northwestern University in Illinois found out that the infant brain comes equipped with something they call intuitive or naive physics, so a basic understanding of very simple physics laws, such that unsupported objects, for example, will fall. So these kind of physics. And my group is kind of working on this kind of natural user interfaces, which we define as those interfaces that you can operate even if you only know about intuitive physics or naive physics. So all these interaction paradigms should be based on these very simple physical rules. But since we're in the virtual world, there is no need for us really to limit us to physical reality. So we can put a little bit of magic into these natural user interfaces. And this brings us to the area in which a lot of our work is, which is on supernatural user interfaces. So having a natural user interface, which is based on intuitive physics, but not limited to physical reality. And again, also supernatural user interfaces do not only have to be graphical, like graphical user interfaces. This is a wonderful illustration from David McCandless, which shows how much information pours to your senses. And we have about 1.5 gigabyte, which just comes to the eyes, and we have something which comes to the touch via your skin, and hearing and taste. And Kesnik was just talking about a crime site. And here's a short video for you, and I would like to ask you to pay attention visually and acoustically and try to solve who is the murderer in this situation.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, son.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
So the question, how observant were you? Have you noticed anything? Yes?
There was a beer in the first scene, and now the night.
So some persons saying there was a beer in the beginning, and at the end there was a night and no beer anymore. Anything else?
There was a clock on the... The guy was holding a different object.
Guy was holding a different object, a clock. So something has changed, obviously. So take a look at the first image here. That was the beginning of the sequence, and this was the end.
Whoa.
And we just heard, some of you might have noticed, or the code of the detective changed. Some of you might have noticed that the flowers on the table have changed. But I think that none of you have seen all the more than 20 changes which appeared during this short video sequence. And just see the same image once, or this video sequence again from a different perspective.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts and precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass.
Buttering his lordship's scones below stairs or something.
But I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Okay, so this is called unintentional blindness, and the idea is, or how it works is that you just saw a fraction of the screen and all the rest was not basically stored or not really perceived by you. If you just consider the image again, this small portion here on the side, this is actually the amount of data which come to our conscious mind and which we can then continue to transform cognitively. And all the rest is kinds of unconscious information which just pulls in our senses, and if we do not pay attention to that, it just gets lost. And in our understanding, this is a super potential to trick you for different kind of supernatural user interfaces. And I just want to show you one example, which is about locomotion, which shows how we try to use this. So this was the major goal of Ivan Sutherland. The last sentence, the wonderland into which Alice walked. So the ultimate display should allow users to explore these worlds in the most natural way, which is by walking, not by using the mouse, the keyboard, any input devices, just walking. And let's have a look again at one sequence from Star Trek, the episode Holo Pursuit. Okay, I can just talk over that. This is Lieutenant Junior Reginald Barclay, sometimes unintentionally called Broccoli, and he's telling her, the crew that he unfortunately has to leave, but they thank you that they support him.
Computer. End program.
So I just heard that already, and program, now the scene evolves, so this is the well-known holodeck, right? So one of the ideas of the ultimate display, in this case, something like a cave setup in which you have projection screens. And again, what always wonders me if I see Star Trek movies like this, if we consider the first sequence, Broccoli entered the holodeck via this door, but later on, when the screens appears, actually there was no door, right? The actual exit of the holodeck was now behind him. So I was always wondering, actually, how can you display a room which is larger than the actual holodeck, and why do people not bump into these walls? And we worked together with which was a project funded by the German Research Foundation, and the idea basically is that, which is illustrated here. So assume this is a user donning on a head-mounted display, and now the user might see like a virtual environment, for example, a virtual chair here. Of course, the user cannot sit in this chair, because they will just fall down. And the idea is now very simple. When we can predict that the user wants to walk towards this chair, instead of using the one-to-one mapping, we can slightly rotate the scene while the user is walking. And now the user needs to follow this path in order to walk towards the chair. And what happened now is the user actually walked in the physical world in a real path, which is curved, whereas the path that he or she believe to walk is a straight path. And we also changed the location, for example, of the door, as in the holodeck video. And again, now the virtual chair is co-located with the physical chair. So now the user could actually sit on a chair, as desired by Ivan Sutherland. And this is called redirected walking. This is now already since 10 years, and it's now, for example, used in arcade theme parks. So who of you have heard about the Void? So this is an illustration of how the Void works, which is exactly the same approach. So you have your physical setup here, and by using this redirected approach, you can extend this physical setup. Here's a short video of how this looks like. So what you see there, you have this limited physical space, but you can display it virtually in a larger way than it actually is. And by overlaying the virtual object with the physical object, you can actually touch those objects. And we were particularly interested, okay, we might guide users on different paths in the real world than in the virtual world, but we were interested how much can we trick the user. And therefore we performed a series of psychophysical experiments, and this is one of the videos from the experiments. So the subject's task is just to walk straight in the virtual environment. Usually we just show a ball at eye level, and the user had to walk towards this ball. Then we rotated the camera in such a way that the user either was guided to the left or to the right. And then basically we asked them, did you walk to the left or did you walk to the right in the physical world? And answers like, I can't tell, were not allowed, and in this case the user just had to guess. And this is how you can analyze the data. So on the x-axis you can see how much we guided the user to the left or to the right, and the extreme means here that within 1 meter straight movement they have been guided ½ a meter to the left side. So a pretty strong manipulation, you will walk something like that. On the right side the same. And now you can use standard psychophysical methods to extract the amount of manipulation which you can do. Just to summarize what we can do, actually, we can guide you on a circular arc with a radius of 20 meters, and then you have no chance to detect that you're getting manipulated. So in a large place like this, we can guide you on circles and you will not observe that you actually walk in a circle. This is still a pretty large space, not available for typical room scale setups. So for this room scale, we see different kinds of locomotion using this teleportation. In thus just 4 times 4 meter place, this will not work. You will observe that you're getting manipulated. And actually you will feel sick when you walk around. Here's just a short video of a very nice approach of this teleportation idea. So you can teleport yourself somewhere, but if you port yourself for long distances, you will get inaccurate when you want to specify your target position. And here they use an additional portal which you can readjust in order to specify your exact target location and distance. And although this is a super nice approach, previous research has shown that if you use portals or teleportation, it actually is not as natural, it's not as presence enhancing, and you have more loss of orientation compared to real walking. And so that's why we really believe you can use teleportation for longer distance, but for all shorter distance, maybe within the range of 10-20 meters, this is where walking provides you a better sense of presence and a more natural way of motion. This is just very recent research which is not published so far, we just submitted it somewhere, and here we slightly adjusted the idea. So instead of telling users to walk straight in the virtual environment, actually we provide paths which are already curved. And it turned out that actually if you walk on a curved path, we can manipulate you much more. Because if you walk on a curved path, this is not something that we do typically on a daily basis, so we do not really have a good sense of how that would feel. And we realized that we can really manipulate users in such a way that it fits in the room scale setup, so about 5 times 5 meters, and then you can explore such environments. And here's a video of this illustration, how this looks like. So this is our infinite path that we choose, so the user can walk like this infinitely in the same direction. But we have some joint points here, for example, indicated here in the virtual environment, where you can change your direction. And again, we just performed the experiments and turned out that we actually can guide users on such a physical path and thereby put an infinitely large virtual environment. And we really believe that real walking is something that we want to do for most of the applications which are denoted as killer applications. So, for example, games and the entertainment market. Of course, I want to walk there, right? If I want to shoot a zombie or a zombie comes to me, I want to run away and go press a button and be somewhere else. The same applies also for real estate and architecture, where it's super important that you actually walk through these buildings with other people and come together and then discuss with them these options rather than one is teleporting somewhere else. You want to have this co-located sense of presence that somebody's really with you walking there. And of course also in social media and communication, putting people together, this is something Kathleen is working on. Again, we want to have this physical presence of being together and not just in this very small space of 3 times 3 meters, but being able just to walk around and explore a different space. Okay, that's it from my side. Thank you so much for listening. Okay, I will have time for 10 minutes, but then I have to run to the my train. Okay.
With the directional pathing you showed, how is the motion sickness working?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a problem, I guess.
Yeah, there's one theory about motion sickness called the sensory conflict theory. So whenever my senses are in conflict, this might make you feel sick. Sitting in a bus, reading some senses, I'm static, but my proprioceptive or vestibular senses say I'm moving, this makes you sick. And we always measure cyber sickness in all the experiments that we performed. We always measure an increase of cyber sickness. But we always also measure this increase if we do not apply redirected walking. So even today with the ultimate displays that we have, the Vive or the Oculus, people do not really complain about cyber sickness, but we measure that. And in the subjective questionnaires, we identify that they still have cyber sickness. But we could not find an increase regarding to the cyber sickness they have anyway with using virtual reality technology. As long as we do not do the manipulations too strong. So this is, if I do something like a 1 meter motion and do like a 90-degree rotation, then people will feel sick. But as long as we stay within this range of what they do not observe anyway, they do not feel something.
You talked about walking, what about running?
Oh, I tried to run with a head-mounted display. I did it with the older versions, a little bit more heavy. Yeah, running is, I mean, that's an interesting question because we are also interested in how far does your velocity change the gains that you can apply. And there is a big question about adaptation. So for example, if I walk in a circle like an hour, probably I can decrease the size of the radius because I get more and more accustomed to walking the circle. We haven't really performed experiments with running subjects at that time, but it seems to be an interesting point of view. So.
What's your opinion about omnidirectional threadness?
Yeah, I tried one of the first ones, which is at the MPI in Tübingen, which is a super huge setup. I mean, they have like a gym hall in order to have like a 4 times 50, about 4 times 4 meters square omnidirectional treadmill, so a super big thing. It has to be actually larger to really provide you with all the senses of natural walking. Because as you might know, we have like this vestibular sense which informs us about acceleration. And when I do, for example, running on a gym in a treadmill, I do not get this information anymore. And I mean, if they would be good, we would just buy them in our lab and we would just stop the research in this direction. Okay. Yeah? But the point is, they just do not really work pretty well. Even the best ones that I saw, you still have the impression that there's like a big machine that you kind of use. And I mean, if you start stopping and want to change very quickly, it does not work, so you have to be very slow with all your motions, and it brings you always back to the center. So even if you stop and you're on the border, then you feel this kind of brings you back and then you're here again. There are super nice approaches from Japan. They have like roller blades, electronic roller blades, so you have them and they always bring you back. They have like circular floors, which are small plates which move like robot platforms, and you walk on this platform, and the platform is moving, and you have like 6 of them in the room. They can also change the height, so they can make you believe walk stairs and so on. Everything, I mean, very super cool hardware prototypes, but really far away from having something which you just have in your living room, for example.
What are the next steps for your redirectional experiments?
Multi-user. Yeah? Just think about, I mean, having 2 persons in the same physical space, they are not allowed to collide. There might be at the same place in the virtual space, so virtually I'm sitting or standing next to this person and now we get manipulated, but I get manipulated on a circle to the left, the other person is manipulated on a circle to the right. Physically we go apart, but virtually we are still together. And what happens now if I want to shake the hand of the person which is somewhere else in the lab? So we have to bring them together again. So this is like super complicated, but also having like remote people also being in the virtual same space and they are also getting redirected, but we want to have touch feedback. So think about, I want to shake the hand of a person who is in the remote space, but I can be redirected to another person in my lab, which is a different person, and I might shake the hand with this person, but thinking to shake the hand. So these kind of questions are super interesting if you're part of it. Any other questions? Yeah.
Come into the academic research, actually, and for quite a long time, I suppose. And now with all these, indie gamers, you mentioned budget cuts, coming up with all these new innovative techniques. How do you feel about that dialogue, say, between you and them?
Yeah, so the question here for the backboard is kind of how did this new hype, basically, with developers going to VR, indie game developers, kind of change our perspective as researchers? So one very, very cool thing is, the thing is just cheap now. So I have a display, head-mounted display, which I bought 6 years ago. If anybody wants to have that, I bought it for 15,000 euros. We used it for one experiment, and then we had like the original 3D data of the Oculus. We printed it in our lab, and that was better than the 15,000 euro thing. And this is really cool that we can now have all this data just for free. I try to go to meetups like this to get in contact with developers, but to be honest, it's not really cool to see that your research, which you have done now, is basically just consumer. So you can just buy basically everything. Yeah? And a lot of the things that Facebook is doing, that Microsoft is doing, it's just better than things that we did. Yeah? And they're really fast, there's much more human resources now into that. And this kind of brings us to the question as researchers, what can we still bring to VR? And we have now a couple of projects which go more into the direction that we really want to see in the brain what's going on. So we work together with health professionals here. So if you see a virtual environment, what is different in your brain compared to if you see a real world? So these are the kind of questions which are super interesting from a research perspective, and I hope that at least Microsoft and Facebook are not going to this direction. Any other questions? Okay.
One small one. Speaking about productive software, or we know from even today that Microsoft is going to do a headset for $300, and we know the Oculus, and we know the Viva, and now there's going to be a mass use of these headsets. I think maybe in 2 more years. And how you see the natural user interface dealing with the productive things like Microsoft Word, or
a lot of these applications that we know from productive work from today, from the office, basically come from a time when you got in contact with the computer the first time in the office. So a lot of the metaphors that we see are inspired by that. We have the desktop metaphor. So if you want to explain a person how to use your computer, just think about this is your physical desktop and this is like the digital extension of this desktop. And all the metaphors that we use there are specifically developed for this kind of two-dimensional world using a mouse and a keyboard. And there is no chance that we will use Word as it is today in a VR environment. Because with mouse and keyboard, I'm always more effective using this kind of device. But of course, with speech recognition, for example, just telling like a virtual agent that he or she should just set my text, which I'm telling to this person. So this might be the way how a natural user interface might look like to put text somewhere. And of course, we can build like haptic devices, which gives us the illusion that we have a real keyboard in the virtual environment, which we can type. But why should we do that? I mean, we have a physical keyboard in the physical world. We can use it there. There's no need to replicate this in a virtual environment. But using, for example, speech is the most natural communication channel. This might be, for example, a way to put text into a document. And then you can think about all the other applications which we know today from productive office work and how can they be re-implemented in a virtual world. Okay, so thank you so much.